Good afternoon. My name is Ken Stern. I'm the director of the Bard Center for the Study of Hate, and I want to welcome you to this last panel of the day. I appreciate your sticking around and the importance of the discussion we're going to have here. We're going to also try to end around 4 so you can all go on with your busy days. But we're going to be talking with federal and state agencies about what they do, and the purpose of this is to really start a conversation to talk about how the agencies and communities work together with each other and with, the communities work with agencies, agencies work with communities, and agencies work with each other, and communities work with each other. And the goal of this really is just to begin the conversation because there's so much work that we need to do together. And I hope that people in the audience take advantage of the fact of these wonderful professionals here and what they're doing to oppose hate, and we'll reach out and make a vow to reach out to each of them in the aftermath of this. So this isn't just a day where we all get together and feel good about what we're doing, but actually can make the connections and find out more of how we can work together, what resources there are, and conversely, what people on this panel and other people that are government officials can learn from you about what you experience to inform what they can do better. Before I do the introductions, I want to just mention a couple of things that may be of utility to you from what I do and what the Bard Center for the Study of Hate does. The premise is that hatred is part of something that we've all been dealing with as part of the human condition forever. And we know too little about it. And we're trying to harness what we do know from the sort of siloed places in the academy to give us better answers of why and how people define somebody as an other, and how that leads to dehumanization and dehumanization under which conditions, and how those things grow and how you can curtail them. And there's a lot of good insight from the academy that we're trying to harness to make it accessible to people who combat hate on their daily lives and as part of their day jobs. So I want to mention a couple of things that are on our website that may be of utility given the discussions that we've had already today. The first is a community guide for opposing hate. This is all on the Bard Center for the Study of Hate website. It's a nuts and bolts plan for what do you do? What do you do when you have a hate crime in a community? And how do you turn that awful event into an opportunity to organize and sustain things? How do you work with government officials? How do you work with journalists? How do you work with coalitions? How do you take the hatred that hate groups and others spew and turn that around on them? How do you take their free speech rights and make it have a cost without infringing their free speech rights? Scenarios about how do you deal with leaflets being put on lawns or the protest at drag queen story hours. So there's about 13 different scenarios, and I commend that to you. The second thing is, this just came out, the economic costs of hate crime. We calculate just about the cost of everything, but not things associated with hate too much. And this is an analysis of what hate crimes cost. And you heard today from various different people what the impact is. But this is an economist looking at the direct costs, the indirect costs, the short-term costs, the long-term costs, the salaries of all these people when there's a hate crime as part of the cost. And we use the attack that you heard before, the House of Worship 10 years ago, as a model to illustrate what those costs are. And then finally, there's a State of Hate Index. And what that is the observation of a political scientist. Some of you that are old enough remember the old Green Book for African Americans in the South about where you could stay and where you couldn't, where you could eat and where you couldn't. And there was a similar one for Jews in the Catskills, where you could go and where you couldn't go. And the observation is there's a geographic aspect about how hate manifests. It's not just the hate crimes in particular communities, but it's the laws. And we've certainly seen that in the last couple of years about it really matters what state you're in, right? So it ranks the different states, and I have to tell you, it's much better, despite all the problems that you've heard today, to be in New York, which is the top, the best state, than Idaho or Montana. And what I want to say about that is that That to me says that this is an opportunity. I work with people in Montana, I work with people in Idaho. They would not have a meeting like this today. They would not have a governor that convened a meeting like this. They would not have you showing up today for a meeting like this with just the statement that makes. So given the fine sort of situation that we're in relative to other states, I think we'll go forth today to take advantage of this. The opportunity is really something that we should all do. So let me introduce the panel, and then I'm going to ask them a few questions. We'll go down Jamey first, and then we'll go on from there. Jamey Barcomb is the Regional Prevention Coordinator at the U.S. Department of Homeland Security Center for Prevention Programs and Partnerships. Matthew Lattimer and Linda Ortiz, Community Relations Specialists for the U.S. Department of Justice Community Relations Service. Joan, I'm going to screw up your last name, but she's from the Senior Director of the New York State Division of Human Rights, Hate and Bias Prevention Unit. Sorry, I didn't have the cheat sheet.
Joan, Pangilinan-Taylor.
Thank you. Thank you for saving me. Hassan, Naveed, the Executive Director of the New York City Office of Prevention of Hate Crimes. Todd Baxter, the Monroe County Sheriff, the Rochester Threat Advisory Committee. And Rick Sawyer, the Special Counsel for Hate Crimes of the New York State Office of the Attorney General, Civil Rights Bureau. Their resumes are impressive. You can find them in the program. So, Jamey, I'm going to start with you, and then the rest of you would appreciate you answer this question, too. What should people know about your agency and what it does to combat hate? And when should they contact you for help?
Yeah, thanks, Kenneth. I think, the first thing I would say I would like folks to know about the Department of Homeland Security and the organization that I'm affiliated with, and I've heard the Secretary say this in many cases before, is that the Department of Homeland Security is essentially a department of partnerships, right? And the idea there is, as vast an organization as the department is, and all its capabilities, we cannot beat this challenge alone. It's really going to take everyone, right? It's going to take the federal government, our interagency partners to collaborate together. It's going to take state and local authorities. It's going to take all of our other institutions, institutions of higher education, our K through 12, our community-based organizations, our faith-based organizations, nonprofit organizations that represent a number of different equities, all working together to really address the challenge of domestic violent extremism here in the United States and domestic terrorism. The department does work very closely with all of our interagency partners. We have been, and really work to align our mission on four key pillars that were stated in the National Strategy for Countering Domestic Terrorism, which was put out in 2021. Specifically, number one, understanding and sharing domestic terrorism-related information. That is critical. Working to prevent domestic terrorism recruitment and mobilization to violence. Three, we want to disrupt and deter domestic terrorism activity. And lastly, we want to confront long-term contributors to domestic terrorism. Now, there's a lot behind that, and we can say the Department of Homeland Security is essentially a department of partnerships, but it's more than just words. We're really trying to put action behind those words. I like to think that the organization that I work in, the Center for Prevention Programs and Partnerships, or CP3, which was established in 2021, was really specifically oriented on getting after the scourge of targeted violence and terrorism here in the homeland and working to prevent that. So we do that by providing training to communities. We offer funding. We provide opportunities to build partnerships in that work and increase public awareness about the problem that we're facing. In terms of funding, just so the members here know, and you can find more out about our grant opportunities, but in terms of funding, since 2020, we have invested $50 million in projects and programs addressing targeted violence and terrorism prevention. And we've done that in a number of different ways in places across the country. We've invested certainly with state and local governments. New York State was a recipient of some of our grant funding, but we've also invested in institutions of higher education to develop curriculum to help build out prevention, early prevention programs. We've invested in nonprofit organizations that represent various communities, communities of color, LGBTQIA, various faith-based organizations have been recipients of our grant funding. Because really that's where we're going to make the greatest strides in what we believe is getting resources and developing programs and projects at the local level. So local prevention is really going to be where we think we're going to be most effective. And so that's a key area. And the other thing, too, is keep in mind that when we're investing in prevention programs, we're looking at it from many different avenues or layers of prevention. This morning we had the panel with state government leaders who have worked very hard to establish and deploy policy, right? That would be primordial prevention that really shapes or sets conditions for successful prevention. But there's also primary prevention, right, which is raising societal awareness, civic engagement, community awareness. We invest in secondary prevention for instances where individuals are expressing early signs of distress. They're potentially moving down a pathway to violence. We want to identify that early, and we want to intervene, but we want to do that in a way that gets those individuals help, right? So if we do it well, secondary prevention, that intervention effort will hopefully keep somebody out of a situation where they end up in the law enforcement or judicial system, right? So we want to avoid that if we can. Ultimately, we understand that that won't always happen, right? That's the world we live in. So we also believe there's opportunities to continue prevention even at that point. Looking at opportunities for diversionary sentencing programs or in prison. Some individuals may go into prison not radicalized, but could radicalize in prison. We don't want that to happen. And then as individuals work their way out of, the prison system going through parole and reintegration, we need systems there too. We need prevention programs there too. So we've invested in those programs. Two other elements of prevention that we think are important to invest in is in resiliency. And, there's two sides of that coin, if you will, with resiliency. Certainly, those who have been directly impacted by targeted violence and terrorism, dealing with that trauma and moving forward, there is prevention work that needs to happen on the back end of that. But we can also use the lived experience of those who have gone through that to help with resilience early on, to help others be more, stronger against the risks that are posed in our society, that the misinformation, the false narratives that can come into somebody's life that can help, maybe they might be vulnerable, but be moving them down a radicalized path. So resiliency helps fight against that too. So we've invested in those programs as well. So those are just a couple examples of where the Center for Prevention Programs and Partnerships is looking at prevention, from a holistic and from a public health informed approach to address, preventing targeted violence and terrorism.
Thanks, Jamey. Hi. Hello, New York. Good afternoon. So my name is Linda Ortiz. I'm a conciliation specialist for the Department of Justice Community Relations Service. We are a component under the Department of Justice that is charged with Title X from the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And we have been working with communities and assisting them in preventing violence, having difficult conversations around allegations and perceptions of discrimination based on race, color, national origin. That's our first mandate. Our second mandate is the Matthew Shepard James Byrd Act, also known as the Federal Hate Crimes Prevention Act. And we're tasked with, Jamey talked about response. We are the federal arm of your government that responds to the perception and an allegation of a hate crime. And so while today we are here talking about hate crimes and we spend an entire day, we'd like you to know that we work with the difficult conversations and the difficult situations that do not rise to a level of a hate crime. And we're a resource to everyone in the community in many sectors. We work in the education sector. We work in the administration of justice sector with law enforcement. And we also work in areas of general community relations. And that means that, let's say there is a change of demographics happening, a sudden change of demographics happening. New York City experiencing the busing of migrants to New York City, to a sanctuary city. And that may cause some tensions in some communities depending on where they settle. And we respond to those tensions. I'm here with my colleague, Matthew Lattimer, who's going to share a little bit about some of the free and confidential programs that we offer to communities.
Great, thank you so much, Linda. So there are 4 main services that the U.S. Department of Justice Community Relations Service provides. We provide consultation, where we bring in best practices, trainings, things that have worked other places that we can share with folks to create their own specialized programming. We also do facilitation. So in terms of having meetings, public meetings, having a third-party neutral sometimes relieves some of the tension, so it's not a partisan meeting. That's something that we can also do. We also provide mediation, where we can actually get people sitting at a table. And sometimes we actually do the shuttle diplomacy before we even get people to the table to actually come up with some agreements to move forward. Lastly, we also do trainings. So there are actually several training programs that we have. Most notably, we have trainings for law enforcement to build partnerships with both the Muslim and Sikh community, as well as working with the transgender community. We also do programs in schools. We have a program that's called the Student Problem Identification and Resolution of Issues Together, which is actually a conflict resolution when there have been bias incidents, hate crimes, allegations of bullying in school, where we actually work with community facilitators to work with students to identify issues, to prioritize them, and help them to develop solutions to move forward. Lastly, we also have a program that's called the Dialogue on Race. So many times when communities are dealing with bias incidents, allegations of hate crimes, or actual hate crimes, we actually work with community leaders, we work with faith leaders, we work with law enforcement, we work with business owners, everyone that is part of the fabric of a community, to actually sit down and have a conversation about, first of all, what happened, but also to get to know one another, to talk about the difficult topic of race and how it affects us all, and to work on identifying issues, problems that are in the community, and sometimes dispelling some long-term histories that have happened in communities, and working towards solutions. Did I hit it all, Linda? Oh, thank you. Lastly, there's another program that we also do that's called Protecting Places of Worship. So where there have been houses of worship that have experienced bias incidents, vandalism, hate crimes that have happened, we actually bring in all of our federal, our state, our local partners to highlight the resources that are available for those communities, to strengthen resources for that house of worship, to make folks secure in that time, that special time that they are coming together to worship. And that's something that we also do in conjunction with our U.S. Attorney's Office, our FBI, all of those different agencies come together for that. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I think the Hate and Bias Prevention Unit with the Division of Human Rights, this is the newest program, and we are standing on the shoulders of all the state agencies and federal agencies that have this incredible, amazing prevention program and support in the community, as well as with the community-based organization, all the speakers earlier that spoke about what they do in the community. We are here as DHRs as an agency and also this new unit that we are supporting. We are watching and learning and being inspired but from what you all do and what everyone in the community does. And we do appreciate that. And Commissioner Imperial earlier spoke about the mission of the unit, the Hate and Bias Prevention Unit. And what we aim to do, our goal is to be there to contribute into this movement of ending the normalization of hate and reducing the hate and bias incident. And how are we going to do that? We are going to utilize what we can with community building, supporting dissemination of information and information sharing in the community, providing compassionate response when incidents of hate happens, and supporting our youth initiatives because they are the future in terms of being able to really understand and address this issue and be there showing us the way on how we can work together with them. There is also a deep collaboration that we are looking at with our state agencies and federal agencies and community-based organization. And what are we going to do with increasing report of hate and bias incidents? And in that increase of reporting, what do we do with the data so that this informs us on how we move forward so we can truly address it and addressing it in a way that it is very mindful of the inequities that comes with the issues of hate. Hate does not come out of a vacuum, right? There are many, it's not just bias or unconscious bias or the differences that we see from other people. There are also inequities that our communities experience. So how do we be able to understand that and support that? The Hate and Bias Prevention Unit, we're very grateful that Governor Kathy Hochul gave us this mandate to start this unit. And then we have also the leadership of Lieutenant Governor Antonio Delgado to help us out, to co-chair this regional council. So we are establishing regional councils, 10 regions throughout the state of New York, 20 to 30 members and representative of members of our community, also members from law enforcement, district attorneys, and what we want, our role in supporting that regional council is to be there to bring everyone together, to convene, to gather compassionately, and to give support so that all the members in the council and the people in the community that we will be engaging through that work have the opportunity to be able to speak, be heard about these issues that's happening in our community, and gain clarity in the ways of how do we move forward with this. We are there to support because the community and our agencies, that collaboration, are the ones that are the experts of these experiences. And through that work and creative strategizing and implementing programs that are responsive and also reflective of the needs of the community, that's what we're hoping to do. The other part of this is also the compassionate response, and Linda and Matthew talked about in their work so much about supporting community dialogue. Yeah, the community dialogue in a way that we bring everyone so that differences are heard, and within that differences also being able to commit to open up and allow ourselves to be changed in a way that we can then understand how are we actively going to be moving forward with this. the youth initiatives again, and then also what we would like, there's also resiliency program that we want that in this kind of work with the community, there's also, we recognize that there's a lot of work that the community is already doing, so how do we support that, those programs that the community are already starting and addressing this?
Is it already on? Oh, there you go. Hello, folks. Good afternoon. And first, I just want to thank the governor and the governor's office, Division of Human Rights, and all the folks for this fantastic event. It's great to be able to be among folks who are fighting, especially the community organizations that are here today, too. And just so you know, we all know each other. We work with each other on a fairly regular basis on these sorts of issues. So my name is Hassan Naveed. I'm the Executive Director for the Office for the Prevention of Hate Crimes. We are part of New York City Mayor's Office. We're within the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice. We have a very long name, Office for the Prevention of Hate Crimes, but I'll boil it down just to our acronym OPHC for the sake of just expediency. And so OPH is relatively a new office. It came about in 2019 after we saw hate crimes across all categories rise in this country, but also in this city as well. We had seen the scourge of anti-Semitism at this point in 2019 with an incident that took place in Muncie in December, and saw the impact that that incident had on New York, but also across Jewish communities around the world, right? And then we came across a time with the anti-Asian crimes related to the pandemic. That was something that we ended up basically hit the ground and running. And so our office was an intentional effort on part of City Council to create an office that seeks to address bias, hate, and discrimination. Well, what does that mean? Literally, it's the city saying, we're creating an office, structurally, we're prioritizing you to be able to prioritize how we go about addressing hate, bias, and discrimination in a comprehensive, these are my 3 C's, in a comprehensive, coordinating, and consistent manner for the first time. What does that mean, comprehensive? The city itself has a law enforcement strategy when it comes to hate crimes. But at the same time, we all play a part when it comes to fighting hate. And so this was the first time where we were looking to invest in community-based organizations to get them to also be involved in this process as well, too. So this comprehensive strategy includes community-based organizations as well, too. And coordinating. We have so many city agencies across this city that work on issues related to bias, hate, and discrimination. Let's all come to the table and have a conversation about how that's happening. There needs to be a level of coordination on how we can best respond to these issues, how we can best work through prevention, and having stakeholders within government, outside of government, from other agencies in the federal or state government. It's essential for us to build our efficiency and our effectiveness. And then also consistency. I mean, just imagine bringing all these city agencies together and building out a consistent, comprehensive strategy across the city itself to be able to combat hate crimes. We were the first office of our kind in this country, and we're happy to be able to say that we are really relying on 3 pillars that really leads our work. And the first pillar is community. And Mayor Adams has invested $2.5 million into about 50 organizations that are primarily focused on community-based initiatives towards fighting hate, hate crime prevention or hate crime response. And they represent the immense diversity of our city, all the way from LGBTQ groups to Muslim groups to immigrant groups to Jewish groups, just the plethora, more than 55 organizations across this city. And some of them actually were here earlier today, but we do this through 6 anchor organizations that really play these strong roles as credible messengers, right? That includes the JCRC, the Jewish Community Relations Council, the Anti-Violence Project, God Squad, or the 67 Precinct Clergy Council, the Arab American Association of New York, the Asian American Federation, the Hispanic Federation. These credible messengers are key in us engaging with those communities to be able to get this money out there, but also ensure that our approach is culturally competent and meets the needs of communities individually. We also are working towards education, too. After an incident happens, we know, whether it's in a community itself, that the incident and the school that might be near it, you have students who are asking questions. What happened? What happened in our neighborhood? and putting resource guides out for teachers and educators in the schools themselves to be able to answer those questions, and also really refer students to resources, because sometimes I worry sometimes when you go on to Google, what you put into Google may lead to a plethora of conversation on social media that is not necessarily consistent. It's a time of misinformation in many ways as well too. So really directing our resource guides towards folks and getting resources to them. And then also we're working towards putting out a hate crime curriculum, really focused on showing that an attack on one New Yorker because of who they are is an attack on the very fabric of our democracy, of our city itself. And that's what we're hoping to be able to put out sometime later on this year. And then last, our pillar is laws and law enforcement. It's important for us to be able to have these interagency committee, to have our partnerships with all the DA's offices, with the NYPD and also state and federal agencies, and ensuring that whatever we're doing is in tandem collectively with all of our approach. Because hate crimes are not controversial, right? We're all in a situation where we're here to be able to fight and combat these issues and figure out response and prevention strategies that best do it. And so that's part of our third pillar as well, too. I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
This is motivating being up here with this crew. I know that you guys get it done every day. So a local law enforcement, we're usually the closest touch point for government for folks that are going through some kind of issue, right? We're familiar with that. But if it's a bias issue or a hate crime, we got to make sure we're ready to receive that information and investigate it. But most importantly, build trust so we can get the information. So at the Monroe County Sheriff's Office, we've been very intentional about building liaison positions. Our liaison positions penetrate communities that might not trust law enforcement, LGBTQ communities. We have a deaf and hard of hearing community that's very large in Rochester, New York. And so we have liaison deputies. These folks have volunteered because they're from those communities or they have interest in those communities. And we form them into groups and they go into those communities to build those relationships, build trust. And then also, if there's an incident, also be a liaison for that incident for us. So that's been very powerful from a local government standpoint, building trust with law enforcement. And then, of course, we have a policy. Every police agency has a policy on hate crimes. But our policy and our practice is the sheriff and the undersheriff will get called when there's a report of a hate crime in our county. 1,000-person organization, it's not a phone call. I get enough phone calls. But the idea is we want to put that reference point there that it's important. And whatever the investigation leads to. But you heard earlier the Lieutenant Colonel speak on the New York State Police just has a wonderful expertise, if you will. Unfortunately, they're gaining an expertise as they go through their hate crime task force and get many repetitions in investigating these types of incidents. So we're relying on our federal partners, also our state police partners, to help us and guide us through the investigations. And then, Commissioner Brady talked earlier about prevention, left a bang, bang, and then right a bang. What we built in Rochester about 4 years ago is the Rochester Threat Assessment Committee. That's a TAM team, a threat management team, designed about targeted violence. And we're the first one in New York, probably the second one in the United States. We're very proud of that we've looked at over 50 cases in Monroe County in the last 4 years that were going on that stairway towards targeted violence, towards the next Tops massacre, towards the next school shooting. And by having 28 agencies that get together twice a month in Rochester, New York, and look at these potential targeted violence cases as a holistic public health issue as opposed to law enforcement. I lead it because I got the Office of Sheriff, so we can have some impetus, we can get things done. But we very intentionally didn't call it the Monroe County Sheriff thing, right? We didn't call it that. We called it the Rochester Threat Assessment Management Team. So we want people to understand that if you have a loved one that's idolizing things and going into that grievance process and just can't get off that targeted violence stairway, that it's not going to be a cop showing up just to lock them up. It's going to be 28 agencies coming together. We have people from corporate world. We have people from the nonprofit world. We have people from that have expertises in domestic violence. We have school districts that represent school districts. We have our federal partners in law enforcement. And they all come together twice a month, and they manage these cases through sometimes a couple weeks to manage one through, sometimes a couple years to manage one through, as we try to work with individuals that might form that next targeted violence case in Monroe County. So I'm going to stop right there. I know we're short on time, but love to answer any questions people have.
Hi, everybody. My name is Rick Sawyer. I'm the Special Counsel for Hate Crimes at the Office of the Attorney General, the State Office of the Attorney General. Pardon my hoarseness. I'm getting over some bronchitis. Thank you to the governor. And I'm not actively contagious to anyone near me or anyone out there. I just wanted to thank the governor and the department, the Division of Human Rights, for putting on this panel and for inviting us all to speak and share what all of our organizations are doing. I don't need to tell you that fighting hate has been a priority for Attorney General James. I am the head of a unit that is in charge of enforcing the civil rights laws, not the criminal laws, but the civil rights laws prohibiting bias and hate incidents in New York. And so we come at this problem from a different lens than some of the criminal enforcement agencies that you might have heard from. We're very much focused on working with communities to help heal after incidents of bias or hate, but also seeking court relief against individuals who have committed acts of bias or hate against vulnerable groups. And what that court relief, what shape that court relief takes is very different from putting someone in prison. And that's something that we take very seriously, how we can use the powers we have in the civil court system to get justice in a way that's different from incarceration. As part of our mandate, we have helped to strengthen the laws prohibiting bias and hate in the state. We helped and with the help of the governor, got some legislation passed last year that have increased the penalties for individuals who commit bias and hate acts, and have strengthened our office's oversight over those things. But we also recognize that hate isn't something that just happens on the streets. Hate also happens in social media. Hate also happens systematically. And one of the things our office has been focused on is finding ways to change the laws to make it easier to hold social media companies and people on social media accountable for hate and violence that is the foreseeable result of some of the postings and some of the other activity that happens on social media. We also have looked at other discrete, more creative ways of directly addressing hate. We brought the first of its kind lawsuit under the Ku Klux Klan Act and the Voting Rights Act against two fraudsters who sent robocalls to black New Yorkers trying to disenfranchise them, trying to convince them that they didn't have the right to vote by mail. We won that case. Thank you. We had a very strong opinion from the Southern District of New York, and now we're just waiting to see how much money they owe New Yorkers. So stay tuned. And so working on these issues systematically is something that our office has been doing. And the only way that we can get better at it was with your help. So I really echo Professor Stern's remarks at the outset. I want this to be a continuing conversation, and I hope that some people in the audience will come forward later on and introduce themselves by email. We can have a meeting, because I would like to hear what's happening in your community. Thank you.
So I promise we'll be done just about 4. I do want to take about 2-3 minutes, and then we'll be done, because I want to follow up your comments and what I was saying before, give an opportunity in 20, 30 seconds for each of you to say what you would like to hear from people there. I do want you to reach out. What do you need to know that would be helpful to you in your job? So take 20, 30 seconds each, and then we'll finish.
Yeah, thank you. And I would say, just to echo, that it was unfortunate. I think we were kind of saying this in the back here. The panel that preceded this one was phenomenal. And I've been in the audience all day, and that's the one panel I really, really wish I could have sat through, because that's what I think helps inform our work, is hearing from the community about what the challenges are, where the opportunities lie, and for me as a regional prevention coordinator, I'm trying to service multiple states. I live in New York. I live in Buffalo. Obviously next weekend is going to be a very emotional event, but, a week and a half ago or so, the Whitfield family held an incredible event at Buffalo State University. and I sat there and really was able to hear a lot of different perspectives and points of view from a community that's still grieving. And that is really helpful. And so I think that's what I would ask is, like Rick said here, is, most of you I probably have not met. I've met a couple folks I've only talked to through email while I was here, and I had lunch with Julio. I don't know where you are, but I mean, this created a great opportunity to really connect with members of the community to really hear what you're doing and maybe discuss and think about how there could be opportunities to collaborate and partner in the future. So that's what I'd like to convey. Thanks.
Linda, just all very briefly.
Thank you. I think, I was talking about the best panel, which was a panel that preceded us as well. And I think that it's really important to focus on people's personal stories and testimony and know that the people here on this stage today, listen to those, rely on those, because those stories activate us in our work through our specific mandates. So we validate those stories, and please continue to share those really important stories.
And we actually were talking about this before we came up on stage. What value can we add to you? What do you need? I like the saying, communities know what they need, and we want to listen. We want to hear from you.
We have been at DHR with the Hate and Bias Prevention Unit, have been given this opportunity and a blessing with this regional council, to be able to have the community work in the 10 regions, and already would be working with 200 community members and more, because we're going to be engaging. And in that work in the community, we will be there. Let's talk. Let's have a dialogue. Let us listen and actively listen, and with the needs and concern, and then with that inform us on what the work that we need to do moving forward. So we are counting on you as we count on each other. The deep collaboration and meaningful presence in the community is what I'm looking forward to. Thank you.
Thank you. And for us, I mean, we're here to listen as well. And I think that it's also, we want to also provide opportunity for communities to be able to also work towards proposing their own projects. We want to be able to extend those opportunities out to folks who may not be a nonprofit, or maybe a nonprofit that has work around addressing bias, hate, or discrimination. And so the Office for the Prevention of Hate Crimes and the City's Commission on Human Rights both launched community grant projects that focus on eliminating bias and hate. And it's about $5,000, and we want to be able to get those resources out to communities to be able to apply for that funding, put a proposal forward, and know that we're always willing to be able to innovate and trial things. And it was a request that was a while back, and I think it's strong for us to be able to put forward some of these capacity building opportunities for these to address this issue. So if you're interested, nyc.gov/stop hate, and you can access an application there. Thank you.
I think we have to be very intentional about relationship building and not assume other people know what we need or vice versa. And that's got to be intentional at the community level, where folks reach out, make phone calls, sit down, have cups of coffee, and understand each other. But that's got to be a very intentional act. And I'll just say what I said earlier. Don't assume we know, or don't assume someone else knows what you know. Those always have to be fostered conversations. So feel free to reach out.
As a representative of the people's lawyer, I just say that when you come to us with problems, it's our job to sit through and find a creative legal way to address them. So don't be quiet. Come forward to us and tell us what's happening in your communities, and we'll think about it, and we'll try to take some action.
So I wanted to just say thank you for the audience for coming. Thank you for these wonderful professionals for sharing their expertise with all of you today. I also want to thank, Joanne, I'm going to say it right this time, Pangilinan-Taylor. There you go. Who you don't know, but spent a lot of time late at night organizing this panel, and I'm sure lots of other things that have happened here today. So join me in thanking all of you.